Hey everyone, welcome to the Way of Champions podcast this week. It's John. Before I jump in, I just want to say thank you to all of you who share this podcast and have subscribed to the podcast. Get so many emails, so many speaking requests, and people are like, "Oh, I've been listening to this podcast for a couple years. It's so helpful." And it's amazing how the reach has spread around the world. And so you can really help us by recommending it, by subscribing on whatever platform you listen to, and just share it with one or two friends. Share an episode, share something you think they'd like. Because I know Jerry and I work really hard to get the best of the best and deal with the most relevant topics out there every single week. This week is no exception, and we're super excited to welcome back Skye Eddy to the podcast. Skye is a longtime friend. She's been on the podcast a couple times now. She is the founder of Soccer Parenting, soccerparenting.com. She does incredible work in that space, supporting parents in youth sports, not just soccer, but mostly soccer, and supporting hundreds of clubs around the country, around the US, and even national federations in Europe and beyond, to engage parents and help them become better sports parents for their kids. Now, one of the things that in the work that Skye does is she gets a lot of questions, as do I, as does Jerry, around, hey, I'm a parent, but I'm also going to be the coach of the team. And I looked up some research, was digging around. It's hard to find the exact number, but I think it's something like between 70 and 80% of youth sport volunteer coaches happen to have a child on the team, right? So almost always when you have a volunteer coach, when you're signing up for a recreational sport or a grassroots sport, the coach who is giving their time to that team or coaches are usually parents. And this can pose unique and very interesting challenges to those parents and the parents on the other side of it, whose kid is on that team. Challenges to friendships, challenges to feeling like there's bias or unfairness and things like that. And so we've gotten so many of these questions that I just reached out to Jerry and Skye and said, we should just have a chat about this. So today is not really going to be us interviewing Skye or anything like that. It's just three of us having a conversation around what we believe are best practices for those parents who happen to also be asked to do the incredible job and have the incredible influence of a coach, and how you can manage that better, what could go right, what's great about it, what could go wrong, and so many other things as well, and how you deal with those difficult situations and difficult conversations. So, yeah, we're going to dive in. We're going to explore this topic for the next hour, and hopefully, those of you who have had the pleasure and the privilege of coaching your own children or are in the middle of it right now, about to start a season, get something good out of this, okay? Before we jump in, just want to give a shout out to all of you who have bought the champion teammate for your team this season. If that's something that interests you, want to do a read, I've been filling orders every single week here for that, and on Amazon as well. But if you want 10 or more books, just email me, John at changingthegameproject.com, and I can save you 25% off the cover price, okay? Also want to give a shout out to Sprocket Sports, our amazing sponsor here, who for years have been supporting this podcast, helping us put it out. Sprocket Sports is the best player registration tool I've ever used. Great team communication tool. Fantastic website and marketing resources on the front end. So your front end's great, your back end's great. So easy to use, so easy for people to pay their bills and all that sort of stuff. So check them out, sprocketsports.com. They are amazing people who all have been in the throes of youth sports, so they understand it from a parent side and a coaching side and an administration side as well. Okay? Now, get ready, get set. Skye, Jerry, and John. Here we go, everyone. Skye and Jerry, so glad the three of us could meet virtually here this morning and have a discussion about a very, very important topic in the youth sports realm, which is the role of being a parent coach, a parent who has a child on the team and also is asked to coach the team. I was looking up last night, just trying to find some statistics around it. And Skye, you may have more than I do, but it said something like the if the of volunteer youth coaches, 70 to 80% of them have a child on the team, right? And my guess is the number might even be higher than that. But
That's what I was thinking when I saw
yeah,
that.
but that was the
Yeah.
number. I was from like Demisphere or something like that. But let's just say the vast majority of volunteer coaches are coaching their kid. And right now it's August and seasons are about to start. And so we have tens of thousands of these parent coaches right now about to get started. So, yeah, I mean, Skye, do you have any other interesting statistics around this topic?
Maybe not statistics. I think the thing that stands out to me a lot when we're talking about parent coach is that I often say, I feel like this is the most under-resourced and most important coach that within the structures, the ecosystem, the coach education that we're doing in youth sport, we have a tendency to miss this vital group of the coaches that are coaching the novice players and need support and guidance themselves.
And
Why do we miss these people?
well, we
I
overserve the high end coach, right? Who is willing to pay money and take courses. There's plenty of stuff out there, but it's that volunteer who I think number one, like, okay, I'm doing this for 2.5 months. Maybe a lot of us are voluntold, right? Like if you don't, I mean, how many people whose names are at the end of the alphabet have been told, like, if you don't coach, there's no team
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we called everyone else and they all said no, right? Um, so they 2.5 months, and I think there's this challenge as well of like we now have national safe sport standards, and we have different states have first aid and concussion and all this sort of stuff. And so all of a sudden, there can be 4 hours of training that this volunteer coach has to do without ever speaking about soccer or basketball or t-ball or whatever. So we inundate them with stuff plus all the hours to do it. And yeah, it's so they're given lots of things they have to do and then a 25-year-old PDF of here's a practice.
Yeah, and Jerry, to your point, what I often hear from directors in youth programming, the ones that are trying to get those coaches to register to sign up, say if we have them do any more coach education, we're going to lose them. Like I'm not going to be able to keep them. And I often just say to the administrator in that situation, "Are you sure? Like, could it actually be the link that might keep them engaged and give them the education and support they need so that the season will be much more empowering and they'll feel more satisfied and less stressed, but to be determined. But that's often the pushback I get from people.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, to me, you're absolutely right. They might be actually turned on to coaching. It might even light a flame inside. And the responsibility, therefore, falls on the shoulders of all of us involved in these organizations. There's just thousands, as you know, out there. And when we create a wonderful program, people will want to, you won't be able to turn them away. And that's not idealistic speaking. I know for a fact that we have a couple of local people here that put on stuff, and people want to go because it's so interesting and so much fun. I mean, imagine you and John conducting these things nationwide. People, how could they resist you, right? Because of your approach and how much they could learn and how wonderful they would be in their life, to say nothing about coaching.
Yeah, I mean it's such an important thing that I think um I agree with you, Sky. Like I remember years ago, my son decided to play lacrosse, and I was the assistant coach because I was traveling a lot. And the head coach had no resources at all trying
Mm.
to run practices. And I remember he was like researching like I was giving him stuff, but he was researching like college coaches and whatever, trying to come up with practices. Meanwhile, he's coaching like third graders who've never actually played
Right.
before. So,
Right.
that's not what he needed. But he was trying and he was getting nothing from the league. And I totally agree with you. Like, actually, when you train him, it becomes more enjoyable. And then those are the people who are likely to stick around and come back when their kid's done, right? They might still hang around and come coach again because we help them fall in love with coaching.
Absolutely. Or their kid progresses into older ages and they stick around and coach the younger teams and really are become foundational to the club culture. Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to make a distinction early on here because again, I get asked this a lot. And I think it's really important for people to understand, parents especially, that there's a difference between a parent coach and a qualified coach who happens to be a parent on that team, right? I would put you into that category. I would put myself into that category when we were coaching our kids in youth soccer, right? Of like, okay, here I am with a lot of coaching experience. Oh, and my child's on that team, but that's the only way that I am going to be out there, right?
Hmm.
Like I can't, if I'm going to coach, I have to coach my kid because I can't coach someone else's kid and go. And so, I see these clubs like we have a rule, no parent coaches. I'm like, really? Why would you tell a highly qualified coach, maybe the most qualified coach in your entire organization, that they can't coach because they happen to have a kid on a team? That's hurting all the kids. It's not
Yeah.
helping people.
We have that role in our club also, and it was something like I never coached Callie when she moved on. Of course, I coached the kids in rec, but when she moved on to more paid coaching, I see some benefits of that. We were able to work through that by the club would assign the exact same practice times to the team that I was coaching, and then I missed most of her games. So,
Yeah.
it worked out okay logistically, but there was missed opportunities to see her play. Yeah, it's challenging. There's a lot of, as I'm sure we'll get into, just like the drama within the team, the stress that we have from other parents, the stress that you innately have as being a coach. All of those things are really compounded when you're coaching your child.
Yeah. Jerry, anything on that? I don't know how
Well,
much you moved in and out of coaching
yeah.
with your kids as they were
I have
growing up.
a lot of thoughts and observations, some of which you might want to throw me off the air when I express them.
Hmm.
Uh, I because it's my tolerance level is pretty low for a lot of the stuff that I see going on. It's just hard to watch. Um, my thought, and I lost it just now. Uh, I feel like somehow something's been lost. Something's been something happened along the way. Now, because I'm an older generation than you guys, I didn't grow up with coaches. We had no coaches in Brooklyn, New York, but we had 63 kids on my street, not in the neighborhood. And we had a schoolyard and we had a dirt field. And I never saw my parents. And this isn't going to solve today's problem, but I can't help but think to myself, we had a hell of a lot of fun. We didn't have organized sport till we went to high school. And when we got to high school, that was the first time I ever talked to a coach. And so all those years growing up, we taught ourselves how to play. We would choose, you might be if you were the last one picked for the team, you know what I mean? You choose up and I picked John, and John, you were the last one to go. That might be a message to you that, geez, maybe I better get better because I don't want to be the last one picked. So we learned somehow through that system that we had to be better versions of ourselves and to be good athletes. In my neighborhood, which comprised about 5 or 6 different streets, we had 5 athletes go to the pros, and we had at least 10 or more play college ball in one sport or another. And that was because I think they never got burned out like the 75% of the kids today that get burned out and leave before the age of 15.
Mm.
So anyway, it's hard for me. So to your point, John, the only coaching I have done with youth is 2 years with my son playing basketball, and that's all I could handle. And then after that, I was the assistant coach. I wasn't even the head coach. And I tried to use all of my skills, and I have a lot of them to help educate this parent, but his son was on the team too, and his son wasn't doing that well. And God, the words out of his mouth, and he, this child, his son was crying on the basketball court. I had enough after 2 years. So that was my history. That's my career in youth sports coaching. But I am an observer. And John, you and I put that wonderful book together, The Champion Sports Parent, which I think should be a training Bible for all parents and coaches together, and get them all on the same page. So
Yeah, Jerry, I
my
think something that stood out from, oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm
no,
sorry.
no, go ahead. No,
Something that stood out from what you were saying is, and I think this is a good line of thinking for the parent coach that maybe isn't a trained coach who might be listening to this podcast is, you all grew up without coaches, you facilitated your own play. And I think that in a big picture, that the simplification of coaching can be for coaches is that they're facilitating a learning environment for children that leads to natural skill acquisition and development and joy and learning. But it doesn't have to be so detailed. Kind of also to your point, John, with like downloading the college coaches, practices. And I think that what gets really lost in the whole narrative of the parent coach, of the volunteer recreational level coach, is just the importance of managing the players and letting the learning happen, creating a learning environment that doesn't have to be really, really detailed.
I think that's brilliant. I do. And it's the creation of the environment. It's not us that matters. It's the kids coming together. That's the point. And what happens when the kids are together like that? They're I can tell you it was really, really fun. I
Hmm.
mean, really fun. No one telling us what to do. And we would play tournaments and we would play for sodas, drinks. We would buy each other a 10-cent bottle of Pepsi if you won or lost, whatever. So I love what you just said. And yeah, how can we maybe go in that direction? And what would that take in
Yeah,
terms of,
I
John?
mean, I think, I feel like what makes when I do stuff for grassroots coaches and they're there and they're about to start their season and they showed up that night to my talk because they were getting their bag of balls and pennies and cones and they're really overwhelmed and they're not quite sure. I think, especially for invasion sport type things, hockeys and soccers and lacrosse and stuff like that. I mean, the play practice play model is the thing they always write down. And I'm like, play first, then do an activity or two and play again at the end. And some of them were just stunned. Like, what do you mean we can play first? What about the warm up? And I'm like, have you ever seen third graders warm up for recess? No, they roll the ball out and they just go 100 miles an hour because
Yeah.
that's what they do. Like, they don't need a warm up, right? And
Mhm.
even into middle school, like players, you watch professional players, they go out and soccer players play a little rondo or throw the ball. Like, they understand their bodies and get going. So I always talk about that. And the benefits of it, number one, are you can start when the first kids get there, right? So as soon as you have two kids, you just have a game going one on one, and then it's two on two, and then it's three on three, and then you get a second game going. And that can be start 10 minutes before practice time, and then it can bleed 10 minutes into your practice. Now you want to see kids who are excited to be there. They're sprinting across the parking lot because the scrimmage is on. They want to get into the game. They're mad at their parents for being late.
Yeah.
You're burning off the sugar that the parents fed them in the car, the Snickers bar, and, they've been sitting in school all day. Like, all this stuff to play first is, I think, one of the most important things that you can do. And then just, from a coaching perspective, what's the most frustrating thing? Oh, well, I just explained this activity and then a new kid showed up and I got to explain it again. Well, now when you play for the first 15 minutes, there's nothing to explain,
Yeah.
right? And that. I mean, that is one of the biggest things that I think a coach can do is just play.
Mhm.
Then, like you both said, right? Simplify. Extra, the problem with most practices is too much content, right?
Yep.
So one or two activities and then right back into your game at the end or station work or whatever. But I mean, that's the key, I think, to great youth practices because not a
Yeah.
single kid is like, I hope we stand in line a lot right now.
And it's also coaches having confidence because to be also clear, I think we need to raise a conversation that happens a lot when we start talking about play. And oh, they're just playing. Oh, it's just pickup. It's just whatever. And we can facilitate play environments where kids are learning in thinking about the considerations and the size of the field and all different things that might come into play as far as that's concerned. But also confidence from the coach in it's okay to have it be a little chaotic looking. Like play is supposed to be chaotic. Play is supposed to feel a little bit that way. And I hear a lot from coaches, well, if I do that, the parents are going to get upset because what the parents are expecting is the lines, is the structure. And if it doesn't look structured, then parents aren't going to have confidence in me. And so, what we're really talking about is the lack of trust that coaches have in themselves to be able to facilitate something they feel confident around.
Hmm.
Which then leads to the whole obsession about winning for the coach to have to win in order to justify their existence, his or her
Mhm.
existence,
Yeah.
and measure your self-worth by those victories. And that determines about how who's going to play and how, all of that stuff. It gets really complex. It
Yeah,
really.
Hmm.
yeah. I think I'd like to have a conversation here around how a coach can get the season started. So seasons are starting everywhere in sports all across the country. Like what John, Jerry, is your advice to the coach in terms of the ways to approach the facilitation of the beginning of the season? Obviously, I do a lot of work with parent engagement, so a parent meeting better be on that. But like topics for that or considerations that a coach should have as they're starting things out.
Yeah, I mean, there's ton. Jerry, you want to go first?
Well, you know, you're going to have more to say to this than I, John, because of your experience with this. Uh, at the college level, I would have a very different answer, I would believe. But I think it's education. The very first thing is the education of the mission. Answer the question why.
Mhm.
Why are we doing this? And what is the mission? What is our why? And to make it real clear to parents a lot and coaches and the kids what this is going to be. What we're about here. Winning is fun, but we're going to define winning differently, perhaps. We're going to define winning in a way that everyone can win by personal development. And your children are going to learn skills for life during this process. And we're going to use soccer as an example, or lacrosse, as a vehicle to help your kids learn these wonderful, deeper qualities so that when you get into high school or college, they'll be stronger and more confident in themselves, not in whether or not they could put a ball in a cage. So
Mhm.
anyway, I think that's where it's got to begin.
Yeah, for
Yeah, and I
sure.
mean philosophically, right? Like you said, Sky, this first parent meeting, right, with like a little, outline of, hey, here's this, here's the logistics, right? We practice Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're gonna play first, so get your kids there early. Here's why. We're gonna break it down. We're gonna do this. Games are on Saturdays. Here's the game format, things like that. But then I think, as Jerry was saying, like what's the purpose of this, right?
Mhm.
What's the purpose? And my purpose, especially in grassroots sport, is like I want your child to fall in love with soccer.
Mm,
I want them
mm,
to fall in love with basketball. I want to make practices so fun that they go home and they dribble the ball. Or they go home and they want to show you the move they learned in practices. And guess what? Your kids are beginners. And so they're going to make lots of mistakes, right? All this philosophical stuff I think is really important. And then, Sky, something that you said to me years ago, which has always stuck to me, is like we have to stop looking at sport in this really narrow timeline that ends at 18 or something.
Yeah.
Like I want your kid to play basketball until she's 60.
Mhm.
So this is such a small slice of that these next 2 months. Take that long-term perspective, and this is not, there's nothing going to happen in the next 2 months that's going to be emergency when your
Right.
kid's not the starting point guard, or your kid doesn't get to play their favorite position for a game.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
all that stuff is really important.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think how we position things as well. Like I think when we're interacting with parents, because that is the biggest stress, or oftentimes the largest stress that a grassroots coach has, is the interactions with parents and like the setting those boundaries and having the clear culture. And so I would also, as a coach, if you're as you're approaching the season, ask yourselves, like, what do you believe around these parents, and do a little check-in with yourself around any bias that you might have or any stresses that you're feeling, like, or worries that you're having about a specific parent because you saw them on the sideline last year when you weren't coaching, and now, oh my gosh, they're going to be like, thinking and judging me as a coach. So like deal with those, work through all of that so that you can put yourself out there for the kids, show up at the first practice, lead this team in a way that's going to be really conducive to the kids coming back and continuing to play, to move, to your point, for life, not just for this little micro moment in their lives.
I also think one other thing that came across my mind, you guys, is I think one of the most important thing before you ever th talk about playing ball at all is establishing a relationship, the relationship between coach and parents. I mean, especially if you're a young coach. Let's say you're 21 years old, you're just graduated college and you played soccer and now you're going to be coaching in the meantime. The parents are all going to be older than you. That's pretty intimidating. That's it. That's one scenario. The other scenario is that you are a parent and you are the parents' ages. It's so important, just like in any sport, whether it's professional, college, or whatever, the very first session, the very first meeting, or maybe the very first half hour, or the very first hour, I think should be devoted to the intention of establishing trustful relationships. And a lot of people say, you know what, you can't be trustful, learn to be trusted in one set. You can,
Mm-hmm.
the way to gather other people's trust is trust them, and to be in that meeting and trust all those
Yeah.
parents when you gather with them, and they'll trust you, and stay within your boundaries, and be genuine and authentic, and use the what we call the river effect, validate people, make them feel important, make them feel like I'm glad you're here, like I'd rather not be any other place than here. And so you establish these relationships, then there's an openness of hearts. And when those hearts are open, they tend to listen a little better and they tend to get on board with your philosophy and what you're thinking. And so there's a lot to be said about that. And it's not that complex. It comes down to listening to
Mm-hmm.
parents. It comes down to being genuine, kind, open, vulnerable. Vulnerable, like, this is my first time at this. I'm going to screw up and you're going to see that. But I'm going to learn right along with it. But there's one thing for certain. I'm always going to be there for your kid, and I'm going to treat them with respect and kindness. And those are the kind of things that establish relationships. Anyway, John, you were going to say something.
Oh, we lost your mic, John. Or I did.
Ah, I sorry about that. I was just muting my mic so I could have a sip of coffee there. You know, um, I think it's so true. And I remember I was doing uh, a grassroots coach for like under eights for Colorado Rapids and Denver, for their youth club, and there's 60 coaches in the room or something like that, and I asked how many of you are nervous that you don't know enough about soccer to coach this season. And like a half to two-thirds of the room raised their hand, right? And I said, okay. And then I did that little sticky note exercise. What are the qualities of your best coach? And we put them all up, and 90% of them are under, as Jerry said, connections and relationships. And I just said, How many of you are nervous now? Because you all said the best coaches, like, do you understand that stuff? Forget soccer. Like, they're going to give you some great activities to run. You're going to have a great season if you just work on connecting with your players and caring and communicating and just loving them and making it fun,
Yeah.
and making it organized. That's all you have to do. And so I think that's a big thing to like this big exhale of like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I do know how to do that because I'm a parent and I've done this before. And so I think that like starting with that as an organization, saying, listen, you all are more than qualified
Yeah.
to coach here, right? You don't need that much information. You have to have a better understanding of kids than you do of insert sport.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And okay, we're talking about coaching your own child. I mean, that's the game changer of it all. Like for
Yeah.
me, I can manage a learning environment. I love, planning practices. I love being out there as a coach. Add in the dynamic of my child being on the field, or on the basketball court, because I also coach them in basketball. And that's a game changer.
Yeah.
It changes and shifts everything. And so maybe, kind of to your point, Jerry, when you were talking about, establishing trust with the parents, I'm thinking have a conversation with your child. Like have an upfront conversation before you hit to the before you go to the first practice, even as you're deciding if you're going to do this with your child around this is happening. What kind of strategies do we need to put in place? How can we work on our relationship? Because there's so many great gifts that can happen when you interact with your child as their coach. But it's also, as was the case for me, a number of times really stressful when my child had a meltdown or when, there were just, certain situations that made it really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember, I told the story of my TED talk of, when my son was 5 and we'd get to the games. He's like, I don't want to play, and I'm like, hey, I'm supposed to be the all-star coach. My own kid won't play. And it's just, it's such a hard thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, I mean, I think that's such a important conversation of like, hey, at practice, like I'm coach, not mom, not dad, right? So like I'm coach here. And then that ability that when practice ends, take off your coaching hat
Mhm.
and be
Yeah.
parent again,
Yeah.
right? Because it can be all encompassing for your kid to sit in the car. How was practice? Do you like this drill? Do that, do that. And the game ended. Do you see Johnny do this? Do you see Katie do this? And whatever. So it's like you really, and if it's a metaphor or a physical hat, do it. Switch your hat,
Mhm.
take off the
Yeah.
coach hat, become parent again. I think that's one of the biggest things for parent coaches.
I don't know who I heard this from, but I love this idea, and I started doing this with my son. Is we did a physical thing, so it was like, what Davis and I did was we walked around the car.
Mm.
So we got out of the car to training. We walked around the car in a circle, and now we're going to the field as I'm always going to be the mom, but
Yeah,
I'm also the coach. The
yeah,
coach child. We get back, we walk around the car magic. We're back to being mom and dad, or mom and son, and so like that was fun for him. I've had other parents talk about like having a secret high five or handshake that you do to like turn it on, turn it off. Jerry, I think you'll
yeah.
like that because you and I have had a touchstone conversation before about how that changes behavior. So
Yeah, well, what I'm really happy to hear you say was that you said you were walking around the car. I'm glad you got out of the car.
yeah.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
this image of you guys walking inside the car first,
Oh no,
but
no, we're not doing that.
the thing that just came to my mind right now, John, going back to your statement about 70%, you say about 7 out of 10 parents have a child on the team.
It grassroots, yeah, 70 to 80 in both Sky and I would think the number might even be higher.
Yeah, I think there's a need. It seems to me there's a need for communication with maybe you get those parents together. I don't know who's doing this, by the way. I have no idea. But if I were in a community and there were 10 teams in this league, whatever, uh, and there were 8 coaches who had kids on the team, I'd be inclined to want to gather those coaches and maybe even the kids too and talk about these expectations and how everything's going to change. Like, I'll always love you. I'm your parent, but when we get into that arena, I'm the coach. And so that maybe the kids hear these things and all the coaches hear these things, and there's an understanding between everybody that when we go out there, we've already had the education and we've learned how to deal with this. Now, maybe that's just ideal stuff that I'm throwing around, but you know, it's
Oh,
good
I think
stuff.
it's just it's not hard to do, but most organizations don't do it,
And
right?
and so that's where the education comes in. That's where we need to have, like parent training. Those parents who have kids on the team, this is a special category within the category of coaching everybody. And so
Mhm.
you have those, since there's so many, you're going to have 7 or 8 average of the 10
Yeah.
teams, parents in this position. Maybe we have to address that for each organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's massively thing, right? And so like in doing the getting ready for this and looking up and here's, what the AI said, right? There's these like great advantages, right, of this time together and it accumulated stuff from Psychology Today and all that, right?
Hmm.
Amazing opportunity to strengthen your bond with your kid, spend quality time together. Um, Motivation for your child because they're out there with mom or dad, which might be great as well. But then it can also be the negative, right? It can blur those lines between parent and coach. It can lead to over involvement and pressure on your kid because they feel the pressure that you're the coach's kid. And then this family conflict stuff as well. So it's like you have. So I agree, Jerry. Like to just throw people out there and not have them realize like, hey, turn this into a positive, be intentional about this because it can spin off in a negative direction, even if your intentions are great.
Absolutely. Yeah, even like trailing siblings. Like, oh, the one child gets jealous because now you're spending so much time with another child. Like, there's so many things. And then so many factors that make this complex as a coach. Maybe it's also, the age of the child. It's much different coaching a 16-year-old in rec than coaching a 5-year-old in rec. So age of your child, that kind of changes the dynamics of our entire conversation here. The personality of your child, if they're really self-aware, self-conscious, if they're really confident, who knows? Like just the personality of your child. Coaching my daughter was so different than coaching my son. It was both a great experience, but very different. And then like the skill level of your child
Hmm.
compared to the other kids on the team. Like, is your kid the best on the team, or are they like the worst on the team? And that's always another factor that adds a lot of complexity to this experience that we have.
I mean, that was a huge one, with me, when I started coaching my daughter, which was probably sixth grade or seventh grade ish, right? And this was travel soccer.
Mhm.
Um, I said I want to coach both teams in the age group, and my daughter was on the B team, right? And she was a December birthday, so she was the youngest kid in the whole of 34 kids, and she was just small, but she belonged on the B team. I think it's more challenging when your kid is sort of a tweener, right? Not quite clearly one of the best players and not quite one of the bottom players. When I
Yeah.
coached my son, that's where he was in the beginning. He was a tweener, but same thing. I coached both teams and I had a group of kids that I would swing back and forth. Who wants to, play extra? We need some people. We need an extra person, things like that. And so, but that was really challenging, especially with him, because no one was arguing that, like, how dare you put your daughter on the B team, right? Um, and she was very self-aware.
Mhm.
With my son, there was 6 or 7 kids that I would like move back and forth. And so it wasn't
Mhm.
every game or whatever, but there was, people like, well, I think my kid deserves an
It's a
opportunity.
perceived bias that you
Yeah.
have.
So like dealing with this and what I've found over the years is that there's always going to be perceived bias. Even if you don't have a kid on the team,
Right.
someone's going to think you're biased against their kid. So get that out of your head that it's going to be perfect. Like,
Yeah.
if you play your kid a lot, um, there's people who are like, oh, he's the coach's kid. If you try to fight that bias by not playing at all, you hurt your own child, you know?
Exactly.
So it's almost no win, right?
Yeah, I mean that's something I hear a lot. In fact, I had a great experience in England last year with Nick Levitt, who I imagine you've had as a guest
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
show. So I was staying with Nick and his wife Bex, and I went and coached his son Callum's training session. And so this is grassroots football in England. It was great. It was really enjoyable time. But one of the things that really broke down with Nick is like he had a co-coach and they worked with each other's kids.
Hmm.
So Nick never really talked to his son. The other coach really never talked to his son, and they just sort of traded children during the training session. And so they sort of tag team as far as that was concerned. And one of the things that they both brought up to me after, as we were just chatting, was how hard it is because they felt like their kid was always like getting the worst. Like, oh, he's going to play in goal again. Like Nick's son played in goal more than any other kid on that team and didn't want to. But Nick felt this weird. He goes, I keep doing this. So I do think that, there's lots of considerations around how we treat our own children in these situations as well.
Yeah. I would do that as well. Especially with my son who just as soon as I was giving coaching feedback, you just would just you could see in
Yeah,
his body language this was not
exactly.
going well. And so I would always just say, listen, if I subbed him out of a game, I'd be like, go go talk to TJ,
Yeah,
and whatever.
yeah,
As he got older, it was better. But
yeah,
initially it was really hard, and recognizing that and having an assistant to just being super aware of how your child look at them, watch them, see their body language, see if they're listening, and if they're not, don't damage your, like, just find your assistant and be like, hey, can you coach my kid? I'll coach yours. And it's probably better for both kids that way. And then they say the same exact thing to your kid, and your kid's like, wow, Coach Skye is so smart. She taught me this.
yeah. There's nothing worse than the coach and you're making a coaching point and you see your child just melting down in frustration, like tears brewing because you're saying something very, what you felt was relatively benign and it would be really helpful. That is, I think, just one of the hardest things because it's so difficult to interact with your child in front of other kids in this space.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what about the politics of it, right? Like and then there's I mean, and this goes into, you mentioned before, or Jerry, you mentioned before, the friendship piece, right? So this is my kid's friends and his or her peer group. Now all of a sudden, John, the coach, so and so's dad, is yelling at my kid,
Yeah,
or whatever, or benching my kid, or taking their playing
Uh,
time away, or whatever. Now there's an adult to adult, like, wait, I thought we were buddies. Why didn't my kid get to play striker? And then also that child is saying, Maggie's dad, he's so mean, right? I think they liked me, but whatever. It's like, he's so mean. So now you're making your child's situation sometimes awkward if you're not careful. They go to school, and it can affect them
yeah,
if they don't. Like, I feel like I've said this to you, Sky, and I think my daughter would agree. I got to coach her in those middle school years where, a lot of girls and dads sort of don't get along and split
very
apart.
special time.
And I think had become a pretty good coach by then. And so all like most of the kids like really liked me. And so when she was at that age of like, oh, my dad's this, they're like, no, we're not. We love your dad. He's great. So I think I moved up in her estimation because
Yeah.
of my coaching. I think it was very good for our relationship, not a detriment.
Yeah, and I think that can be the case for almost every coach out there if they approach this correctly and if they really put the time into setting that culture, setting those boundaries with parents, so those situations don't even crop up because ahead of time, you already set the boundaries around when the door's open or when it's closed, or difficult decisions, or sharing about stresses that you're feeling around these situations. Even if it's, I'm going to choose 6 kids every week to train up with this other team. We're going to rotate through. You have to follow through and rotate through on everyone. And your child can't necessarily get a lot of preferential treatment. Granted, you're already going to be there, so maybe your child would
Hmm.
be there already. But yeah, we need to be really thoughtful and approach this, with the respect that that the game deserves. The games
Yeah.
deserve.
Yeah, Jer.
So let me sort of go in a different direction. Is this a problem that we have created in this country as a result of the big business? Let's not hide it. The big business kind of situation we have where the travel teams and all the money that's being made in the organizations, blah, blah, blah. Both of you are much more adept at this than I am in terms of internationally. I'm wondering, I'm curious, is this a problem in the United States because it's a big business situation? And do other countries have this problem? And if not, why? And what are they doing to address it? I'm just curious about that.
Mm.
Like if you go to Spain, for instance, are
Yeah.
are are they having these conversations in Spain? Are they needed in Spain? And if they are, what are they doing about it?
Yeah. John, what's your take on that?
My take is yes, because grassroots volunteer coaches are everywhere in the world. Now,
Yeah.
maybe in Spain, the very best kids would jump into, a professional academy, or in England, and
Mm.
then no, they're probably not being coached by their parent. But certainly at the youngest age, just like Nick Leved in
Yeah.
the UK, super qualified, worked for the FA, worked in professional academies, he's coaching his young kids. So yeah, I would say this happens everywhere.
Yeah,
Um,
Mhm.
I was gonna say
yeah,
the same thing. I'm thinking about a last conversation I had with a cab driver in London, who coached his child, his son, and yeah, he was sharing around all the stresses that he was having and stuff. So, my take would be that, these are universal issues, these are
Hmm.
universal stresses,
Hmm.
and I think, this is the work that we're doing is to help people rethink changing the game,
yeah.
helping people rethink
So
the
anything under, say, in this country, middle school, that's what we have here in California, called middle school. Anything under middle school, this is where the problem
Well, I
is
don't
that
think it's a problem, right? It's just more common,
I,
right?
I
There's
mean, when
there's
I
not
say a
as much
problem,
16-year-old rec hockey as there is 9-year-old rec hockey,
um,
so
I don't know if problem's the right word, but what we've been talking about for 45 minutes or 40 minutes is a challenge.
the
mhm,
challenge, yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it. And this challenge takes place uh, with the really young kids because the young group because we don't have any professional capability of providing coaches that can be compensated for financially and what have you. So that becomes an issue then. That's
Yeah.
that's that's where we're at. And you know the bottom where I'm going with this is what the heck can we do about that? I mean, it's human nature. I mean, we're talking about defying human nature. You can't you can never take out of me the desire for my kid to want to play or start or get more minutes or what have you on the ice or in the pitch or wherever it happens to be. And I still don't see a solution to it.
mhm,
And I thought about this for a long time, even though I'm not doing anything about it. Believe me, it's not where I put my emphasis. But psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, those are the areas that I'm concerned about and what this does for kids growing up. I talked about growing up in Brooklyn, New York, and I never saw my parents from one end of the day to the other in the summertime. But boy, I had a hell of a lot of fun. And I played sports for 9, 10 hours a day. And I played stickball, fastball, fast pitching. Then we switched to football, and we played soccer, and we did 1,000 different things in one day, and we all got good at it. But then we had coaches when we got to high school, and that was the. I don't know. It's frustrating to me to see a problem and me sitting here not being able to fix it.
Well, I would say, Jerry, like as the resident psychologist on this call,
yeah,
what is your advice? I'm a parent coach. I'm having a problem with this perception of bias. Or maybe I'm just having a problem with one person, right? A friend, another parent on that team. How do you suggest I approach that conversation with that parent who's maybe upset because they think my kid's taking their kid's time or position or whatever? And I can't believe we haven't mentioned the term yet. I know in like the softball world they call it daddy ball. So let's just call it, how do we deal with this perception of bias and my kid's on the team because I'm the coach and my kid gets to play the best positions or bat first or whatever. I mean, what's your resident psychologist? How do I address those
Oh, you
things?
don't want to give psychology a bad name by referring to me on that because I'm
Sir,
like, you know, I can't defend the field of psychology either because
resident philosopher, then. How about that?
philosopher is more like it, but with some psychological intake input on it. It's difficult. It all comes down again. I see the global picture is one of education, so that that conversation doesn't even have to take place.
Mhm.
I don't think that conversation should be taking place. In fact, when it does, if it has to take place, that tells me something's broken.
But it is broken. So when it does
That's what I'm
take
saying. So,
place,
so,
yeah.
so it's not about the conversation. It's about put get the input before the conversation has to happen, and that is we have to seriously consider having education programs before a season starts with every parent that's going to involve, and it's mandatory that they attend these meetings if they're going to have their kid play, no matter who you are, whether you're the coach who has a son or a daughter playing or whatever it happens to be, that we have to have these education sessions, these modules, maybe they're 45-minute sessions with a Q&A after it, so that, okay, now the season started. Wow, we've been marinated in this whole philosophy of how things are happening and why. And really, what this organization is all about is the developing the full human capacity of my child, not whether we get playing minutes or not. And
Mhm.
and so those conversations are mute. It's a mute point, and we
But
don't
but
have.
they're not a mute point. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. You can have that meeting and the conversation's still going to happen. There's 100% because I have those meetings. I'm
Yeah,
sure Skye had it. You
yeah.
still have the
Well,
conversation.
that goes back to the human nature of it all, that this is going to happen anyway. And then I say, what are we talk? Why are we talking about this?
Right.
Mhm.
Well, it's going to happen. But so we
Why?
do the education. We maybe had some off at the past, but I'm just pushing for you, Jerry, and I'll ask Skye the same question. Like, how do I approach that difficult conversation that's going to happen this
So
season?
technically, psychologically, technically, it's all about listening. And it's
There
all
you go.
about, right? So you have to listen. And we have this acronym, John, that you know as well as I do, and it's called LOVE, LUV. And L stands for listening, U stands for understanding by asking the right questions, and V is to validate. And that's the most important skill you can have in any conversation with anybody, regardless. I don't care if you're talking to the CEO of a corporation or a head coach of a major league soccer team. It doesn't matter. Parent to parent, if I enter the conversation and I'm saying to myself, not to you, what can I learn here? Because obviously you're upset. John, you're coming at me like, oh my God, Jerry, you're playing your child and he's not as good as mine, or he's just as good, and my kid, why doesn't he start? And I'm thinking I'm listening to you because you've got a problem. And as soon as I start listening to you, you feel the respect and you feel connected with me. And so it starts with we've done the education, and then John, you say, and I'll agree with you. Human nature comes in. We're going to have those conversations anyway. We'll head some off at the pass, to use your words. But I come back to this whole idea of like whenever I'm in a conflict situation, my best resource is not to fight back and go head on. It's to listen and absorb and learn. So I ask myself the question, what can I learn here?
Yeah. Amen. I think that that's the answer I was trying to drag out of you. Um,
Oh man, I'm glad I got that right. Holy Christmas. Wow. No,
because I
that's my go-to for everything.
yeah, but and Sky, I'll throw it to you because I feel like in my N=1 years of coaching, 80 to 90% of those things, people just wanted to be heard, right? And
Mm,
if you heard them respectfully, you listened, you whatever, even if you disagreed at the end, at least they were heard. I mean, what's your
yeah.
experience with that?
Yeah, I'm going to come back to two things that I often talk about. I've already brought up trust. Jerry's talked about trust, self-trust. Like we have to go in those conversations, into those conversations armed with self-trust and being able to listen, being able to maybe we are wrong. Oh my gosh, you're right. You're right. Your child never was the captain this whole season. I'm so sorry. Whatever, whatever it might be. Like, but trust that we also have good intentions and trust that we can lead this conversation and we don't have to necessarily just come in defensive. And the other thing, kind of to close off that point, is do a lot of work around this concept that I like to refer to as go with an open heart. And, at the end of the day, what we're doing is impacting the lives of children and families and bringing communities together. And, that's what needs to motivate us in the work that we're doing. And that's what, as coaches, there's so many things that distract us, whether it's a novice coach that is learning the game, a novice coach that is coaching their child, has parent stresses. All of these things are just a distraction from what really needs to be guiding and leading us. And that is the fact that we're bringing the world together through this sport. And what a unique and special opportunity that we have to do that. And I know that's like a big thing to say,
Hmm.
whatever. But
No,
at the end of the day, like that's really what needs to drive us. And we cannot forget that that is what the purpose is of what we're doing. All the other lessons will happen. But at the end of the day, we're bringing people together through this experience. And that's what we're trying to facilitate as a coach.
so it becomes a safe environment. And your point is a good one because it's looking at it from 30,000 feet. And I often tell people, like, why do I work? I work because I want to change the world.
Mhm.
And people say, what are you, crazy? I say, no, I'm not. That world I'm defining by being here with the two of you today, or that world is defined by having 30 people at 9,000 feet in the mountains of Colorado influencing their entire life. I want to change the world that I'm part of. And in order to do that, it gets back to this whole idea again, we come full circle. John, in your question, it's all about the relationship. So I don't want to fight you. I want to join you. I want us to come together and be cooperative and collaborative and have compassion. And what a concept that is. And we do that all through listening, which again comes back to that's my superpower.
Hmm.
I don't know a lot, but I do know this. I know I can listen and I'm good at it. And once I do that, then I can diffuse, deflate, head off at the pass. I can do all these things. But back to your point, John, and also Skye for you too, is one thing is guaranteed. You're going to feel respected. You're going to feel uh, important. You're going to feel valued. You're going to feel relevant. And that's how I want to make you feel. And when you feel that way, it's not the issue of my kid getting playing time. It's I just want to be heard.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I have feelings and I'm upset. And by the end of the conversation, it's yeah, it doesn't really matter ultimately. And, on and on and on. So, yeah, we just
Yeah.
solved the problem, didn't we?
I, I think one last little tidbit for coaches, parent coaches listening, any coach listening, is um, be somewhat proactive in your communication, right? So I couldn't tell you how many times I've coached 8-year-olds and I've turned to the kids sitting out and said, "All right, Skye, you ready to go in?" They're like, "I don't want to go in," right?
Right, right,
I
right.
don't feel
Exactly.
good. I have a tummy ache or
Right.
whatever, right? So now the parents on the far sideline going, John's not putting my kid in. And
Right.
meanwhile, the kid won't go in, right? And so like in
Yeah.
that moment, like, if it's a small field and you can see them like, hey, come over here. But when
Yeah.
the game ends, go find their mom or dad and be like, hey, just so you know,
Yeah,
like I
Yeah.
tried to put Jenny back
yeah.
in. She didn't want to go. I think her stomach hurts or she was scared or whatever. But like diffuse it right away. Don't let that parent think, "Oh my God, my kid got lost on the bench
Hmm.
or whatever," right? Or like, yeah,
Or if you
sometimes
do
kids,
make a mistake and do that, I've had to do that before.
yeah,
I
Yeah.
did not have a child in my lineup, didn't put her in the entire first half, totally forgot that she showed up late,
yeah,
whatever. But right at halftime before the team talk, I walked right over and apologized to the
yeah,
parents
yeah,
and just acknowledged that I had made a mistake. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I guess what we need to do is just assume that the parents are going to think that way and they're going to worry about it. So you diffuse it, like what John and you were saying. You make sure you remember all those decisions that you made and go and get the parents and explain to them exactly why. So that cuts it off and there's no
yeah.
lingering.
Or if the kid's being disruptive at practice or whatever, proactive conversation. Jerry, listen, we just got to talk about your son here. Been trying to work through. Does this
Mhm,
happen elsewhere?
mhm,
Is there anything that we, can talk? Can you just? I am going to, because we have standards here about listening when the coach is talking or
mhm,
not, throwing grass down someone's shirt or whatever. When that
mhm,
happens, I might sit your son out for a while. So if you see him sitting on the sideline of practice, it's because he's been disruptive. I need your help to back that up, and then we can
mhm,
solve this by the end of the year, right? So we
mhm,
work together
mhm,
to make your kid a better person.
mhm,
yeah. Yeah, I think standards are key there. I'm doing a project right now with the Irish FA, and they have a standard of every child in grassroots football gets 50% of playing time of a match. And the only time that won't happen is if the coach proactively reaches out to the parent prior to the match to talk about an issue that they are having and a reason why they're not. But they're really trying to limit playing time not being like a token that's used as punishment. But there's got to
Yeah.
be other things that can we can use as well. But yeah, standards are key here.
Yeah, massive. All right, last kind of questions. We're getting near the end. Um, when is the right time to stop coaching your kid? Skye, I'll
What
throw
was
that
it?
to you first.
Okay. I would say a couple of things come to mind. One is if it's stressful for you and your child and it's not working, then you should not be coaching your child. The priority in this relationship needs to be, your relationship with your child. And, quite possibly it's just not a good situation, not a good makeup of personalities. And also, I think you should consider stepping away if you're feeling like it's becoming about yourself, if you are becoming obsessive about it and maybe don't have the balance that you need.
Yeah. I
Boy.
mean, Jerry, like how important it is just to even ask your kid.
Yeah. Do you want me to coach you? Is that what you mean?
That's,
Yeah.
that's always an option ever, no matter what you do as a parent, say nothing about sports, is, listen, I'm trying to be the best parent I can be. How do you feel with me still doing this? Or how is this going on? And get the input from the kids. I mean, I've done that so many times. I mean, how can I be a better parent for you? Just let me know because that's my goal is to be the best parent in the USA. And you let me know how I can do that if there's anything I'm missing. Well, you can do the same thing as a coach. I know I'm your coach, but how can I be a better coach for you? Not a better parent, but a better coach for you.
Yeah.
But anyway, I love the points that you made. Those two brilliant points, Skye, and let me just sort of coattail on that. I think I have one to add to that, which is this is what John Wooden said when he said the day when I stopped coaching is when I stopped loving coaching.
Mm.
And I think, for whatever reason, that's the umbrella. I'm not loving coaching anymore, so I'm going to walk away. Maybe I'm not lo loving coaching, John, because of something, with my personality conflict with I have four kids. There's two of them that are like me and there's two of them that aren't. And so I'm going to have a conflict with two of them for sure every time we get into that situation. But I do think the umbrella, the 30,000 foot decision for me is looking at the whole situation, say, you know what, I'm just not loving it anymore. And that's when I'll walk away from it.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like I always, in rec, I got them started and whatever. But when I coached my kids in competitive soccer, I would have that conversation. And I'd coached long enough to know that I kind of have like a 3-year cycle with groups where I'm ready to move on as well. I love coaching, but I'm not loving coaching this group anymore. You know,
Yeah.
would work
Yeah.
for me. And so, I remember like coaching my daughter's group once they were going into high school, she's like, "Yeah, Dad, it's probably time," and I felt that too. I was ready to move on as well with my son's group and also at that same time, my son was like, "Dad, when are you going to coach me?"
Oh,
Right? Because I wasn't coaching him
Yeah.
because I was coaching these two other teams in my daughter's age and we're traveling. And so I was, like you said, I was missing all of his games and stuff as well. And so yeah, I was like, it's time. I want to coach your brother. And I had hoped, to do a 3-year cycle, but then we ended up with COVID right in the middle of that and all sorts of stuff that made that messy. So I ended up coaching that group for longer. And then I was done as well. So it was like, but I think, I had those conversations. Is this still working? Is this okay? And then if I had 4 kids, it would have been way harder to try to
yeah,
balance it all. So
yeah.
yeah.
I like to
Um,
just make,
yeah.
John, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just
I'd,
going to
I'd
say
like to
any
I like to
final
make this
thoughts.
point. I want to make sure we get this in here for the listeners. This is a very special moment. I don't mean this podcast, although it is special. Uh, it's a very special moment to not only being a parent, but being a parent coach. What an opportunity. And I don't think we see that enough. And I think when we see the playing minutes versus the opportunity, I think we lose something there. And it's an opportunity to really strengthen your relationship. What a connection you can have. Because in a 60-minute game or however long the game happens to be, you'll go through the psychological lexicon of feelings and emotions in that 160 minutes that most parents will go through in maybe 60 days.
Hmm.
And so it's a special moment to really capitalize on this opportunity that we've been given. And I think focusing more on the opportunity. So I talk about the opportunity and possibilities, not the disabilities. And I think that really helped me when I was a parent. And I only lasted 2 years as a coach, but when I continued working with my children, working as a parent and observing them, I think I kept looking at that wonderful possibility of
Hmm.
of getting closer to them.
Yeah, what an incredible opportunity to spend time with your kids, to
Yeah.
have them see you in a little different light as well, and all that. What's been resonating for me a lot, Jerry, these last couple weeks is we did this certification program, and one of the coaches that we certified, Levi Nelson, has been out. He lives in Wisconsin and does an amazing job speaking and everything. And Levi, texted our group WhatsApp the other day, and he said, "I did this parent talk and got this great idea at the end, the 3H approach to that conversation afterwards." And I think this is so appropriate for a parent coach as well. When your child brings something up, asking them, do you want to be heard? Right? Do you want to be helped? Or what was the third one? Do you
Hug,
remember? And
hugged.
or do you want a hug? Yes, I
Yeah.
can't believe I spaced the hug part, right? You want a
That
hug, you
co
want to
that
be
comes
heard,
from,
you
yeah.
want help. And what a great thing when your child asks you as the parent coach after, do you want a hug? You want me to just listen here? Or do you want some advice and some feedback, some help?
What I
Love it.
like is even if it's not the 3H's, is just have an MO. Your modus operandi is ask the child what the
Hmm.
child wants. And we've said this in this conversation here today. What we're afraid, I think parents I'm going to lose control if I ask the child what the child wants. And first and second is that means I have to do what they're asking. It's
Hmm.
none of those. And
Hmm.
and so it's really cool. My finest moments were asking any one of my kids, so what's the best thing for me to do right now? What would you like from me more than anything? And what's the most important thing to you right now that we need to be talking about or that we need to be doing? And give and empower them with the decision-making process on their journey through the vehicle of sport. What an
Hmm.
idea. And I like that 3H thing, by the way. That was brilliant.
Also,
Yeah.
Jerry, was thinking about like what a great lesson you're teaching your child if you are having a conversation and ask for feedback on your session and then take it.
Hmm.
That's just for your child to see you modeling that type of behavior is pretty powerful.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
it is.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Sky, I want to give you kind of the last word, but also the opportunity because don't you have some resources on soccer parenting for, coaching, coach parent engagement and stuff like that. What's some of the stuff that you can?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in our membership site, we have quite a bit of content related to coaching your child, whether that be specifics about the game of soccer, because our site is focusing on soccer, or whether it be these interactions, whether it be, best practices for leading a parent meeting, getting ahead of it. So absolutely. I mean, it's a big part of the work that we're doing.
Awesome. So soccerparenting.com, right? I'm saying it
Yes.
correctly.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Awesome, everyone. Well, listen, thank you all for listening today. Thank you, Sky, for joining Jerry and I. This
Pleasure.
was, I think, such an important conversation, very timely right now. Hopefully, if you are a recreation director or grassroots director, you'll send this out to all your parent coaches. Be like, hey, just listen here. Here's some tools. Listen, understand, validate the river. These little conversations, the parent hat, the coaching hat. I want to see parking lots full of parent coaches walking around their car with their kid this
Like, what
fall
is going on here?
before stepping on the field, as we transform from parent to coach and back from coach to parent. So, thanks everyone. Thanks Sprocket Sports. Thanks our Patreon podcast champions. And, Sky, we all say your influence is never neutral, right? And the more aware you are, the more powerful it is. So thanks for coming and sharing your influence here today for thousands and thousands of parent coaches out there.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful. Thanks.
All right.